I'm Rick Kahler, and thanks for joining me. Well, the number one question that has been posed to me by clients and the media alike over the last few weeks is, what do you think of the bailout? As best I can figure, the foundation of all of this mess came in 1999 when the current administration at that time, the Clinton administration, wanted to increase the percentage of Americans owning homes. Now, in and of itself, that's a good thing. But the reason that more Americans didn't own homes at that time was that they couldn't afford or qualify for a mortgage to buy a home. The government then pushed lenders to lower credit standards and decrease their down payment requirements. The Federal Reserve lowered interest rates and kept them low for a number of years. Now, all of this came together to result in risky, what we call subprime loans, going on the books of lending institutions nationwide. Many of these loans were sold on the secondary market, and this is where Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae come in, two quasi-government companies. They purchased many of these loans, pooling them into what we call a securitized mortgage product, or a mortgage-backed security. And then they sold these to investors like Lehman Brothers and other investment banks. This allowed billions of dollars to flow into the housing market. Now, this easy money and the demand for housing was like putting gasoline on a fire. It caused prices to soar to incredible heights because of that increased demand. Now, predictably, the party eventually ended. Even with easier credit, lower interest rates, and no down payments, many subprime borrowers could not afford their mortgage payments, defaulted on those payments, and forced lenders to foreclose. Housing prices then collapsed, and lenders suffered enormous losses. Now government policymakers are finding out that increasing home ownership by lowering lending standards didn't work so well. What a surprise, huh? The heart of the argument is now, who's going to pay the tab for this failed government policy? The borrowers, the lenders, or the taxpayers? And probably the answer is all three. I find a number of factors surrounding the current situation pretty puzzling. Those supporting the bailout are, at least on the surface, a pretty astute and politically diverse group. This includes President George Bush, the two presidential candidates, Barack Obama and John McCain, the Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, and the House and Senate leadership. Only the folks, at the time that I recorded this, the only folks in government seem to be opposing the bailout are a handful of renegade Republican and Democratic representatives to the House. Conversely, the American people soundly oppose this bailout, and that opposition appears to be bipartisan. According to a September 28th Rasmussen poll, 50% of all Americans opposed the bailout. 25% supported it, 25% had no opinion. Now, much to the surprise of the leadership in Washington, the House defeated the initial bailout bill. The Dow dropped 777 points that day, which was the largest point drop in history, but nowhere near the largest percentage drop in history. Now, quite frankly, I'm amazed that the markets are doing as well as they are. Government leaders promised us the markets would collapse and the whole banking system seize up if the bailout didn't pass. I guess we'll get the chance to see how accurate their prognostication was. One of my peers in New York told me after reading the bill on Monday morning, it stinks. From the little information that I was able to read about it, I tend to agree. Now, my guess is that the bailout will probably pass, and that it'll probably cause more pain than it cures. My belief isn't based so much on the particulars of the current economic situation or the bailout bill itself, but I'm convinced the particulars of the bill, which is now up to 498 pages, are really unknown to even insiders. It's based on my core economic belief that the more governments meddle in free markets, the greater unintended consequences they create. So like I said, I have a hunch we're going to see some type of bailout bill passed before all this is over. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining me.